As compared to its first 2 seasons, this final season of The Leftovers is only going to get 8 episodes instead of 10, which, according to Damon Lindelof, its showrunner, was purely due to what HBO was willing to offer a show that, unfortunately, and in my opinion quite unjustifiably, has never gotten that stellar of ratings. Even so, I really do feel like Lindelof, Perrotta, and the rest of the writers have continued to pace this show in such an outstanding way, really making it feel like it's not lacking a fifth of its runtime, and this week's episode was no exception. So even while I totally could have seen Lindelof devoting an entire episode to Nora and her journey, and then devoting a whole second episode to Kevin and his, were this a 10-episode season, I really did think that the writers so beautifully and tragically used those characters' unique crises happening at the same time to explain, justify, and indeed elevate where things ended up by this episode's end. And along with that, the combination gave both storylines this thrilling propulsion. These characters, and we along with them, really were sprinting towards this unknown destination. Looking back at the last 2 seasons, we've certainly seen both Kevin and Nora on their good days and on their bad, taking steps forwards and then taking steps back. We've watched Nora hug Holy Wayne. We've watched Kevin acknowledge that he was taking his family for granted. We've watched both of them confess their deepest, darkest secrets to one another. And we've watched them, time and again, unite and bear one another up. And I have believed and continue to believe that that growth and that progression was and is genuine, and that these characters have successfully placed band-aids over their wounds. At the same time, I was not surprised at all to hear Ray LaMontane's This Love Is Over underscoring this week's opening titles, because these characters may have put band-aids over every single cut, gash, and wound that they've accrued from the sudden departure, but every band-aid in the world wouldn't be able to heal the tumors on their souls. Tumors that were there long before their loved ones ever departed and were simply diagnosed as malignant once they had. And on this episode, we were simply forced to look on as Nora, Kevin, Laurie, and John just attempted to further bandage over those external wounds, all the while the internal cancer of fear, guilt, distrust, miscommunication, and selfishness continued to tear them apart. And as much as I do hate being Mr. Pessimistic, I really do think we saw the beginning of the end of Laurie and John's relationship this episode as well. And for them, I think that really stemmed from the cancer of miscommunication. That simple image of a window dividing them, John fading away into the background while Laurie tried to be there for her ex-husband, really spoke volumes. And it's also interesting to note that even while those two in their quote-unquote therapy sessions did give themselves some respectable limits, very intentionally steering clear of providing baseless solace to those that had lost someone in the sudden departure, which was likely done because of Laurie's own departed baby. Even that decision, though, didn't somehow justify all of their actions or make them holier than those claiming that they could reunite Nora with her dearly departed, or even make them immune to brokenness and division. But of course, when it came to division, Kevin and Nora really were the king and queen this week. Little external clues. Kevin choosing to talk to a koala mascot instead of a person face-to-face, or Nora's camouflage shirt visually told us that they were divided and hiding from the world. And then, nearly every one of their words and actions told us that they were divided and hiding from one another. And doing so in one of the most detrimental ways possible, using the truth as a facade. So yes, Nora was willing to truthfully confess to Kevin that she was smuggling $20,000 into Australia, but not in a way that fostered genuine trust or sincerely shared that load, which really has been how she's dealt with her pain this entire show, only revealing it to others for the high of being known and that taste of justice, making them comprehend and endure, even if only in the smallest of ways, the unique suffering that she's had to deal with since October 14th. And the scene of her and Kevin in the bathroom exemplified that well. They were exposing themselves to one another and joining together in the most physically intimate way possible, yes, but not to connect, but only to further conceal and tragically distance. And there was something tragically poetic, too, about that empty sexual encounter taking place on a baby changing table. So much of the fissure in their relationship coming from how they handled baby Lily. But even while Nora was extremely adept at concealment, this really was the episode where she ceased to maintain that facade. That whimsical smile after she left Kevin in the airport screening, for example, wasn't a lie. And her parting words, "see you on the other side," actually betrayed a much deeper truth, as did her description of their relationship. It's toxic and codependent. This woman was so genuinely ready to leave and pretending that she just didn't matter anymore. So 2 weeks ago, her nonchalant reaction to finding Kevin with a bag over his head all but told him, "I don't care if you're trying to kill yourself." And this week, her scramble to answer her phone and desperate race to make it to the bus all but declared to him, "I am ready to die." And part of that readiness really did come from how she now viewed Kevin. Just as crazy as the man babbling about the apocalypse at security, who, by the way, played Bomber in the Hobbit trilogy. To jump over to Kevin for a moment, it really was quite interesting how the hotel that he found himself stuck in this week really was quite reminiscent to the Purgatory Hotel that he found himself stuck in Season 2's International Assassin, and not just architecturally. This was another place that he felt trapped emotionally and spiritually, unable to feel important or needed to Nora and indeed anyone. And moment after moment just compounded that feeling in Kevin's mind. Simple things like Nora flippantly doubting the legitimacy of what was written in his book, or the hotel concierge calling him Mr. Durst, or a frivolous pancake-cooking talk show host narrating his existence. All these things that just pushed him to imagine up this mission that was important and that only he could resolve, which would finally enable him to escape this new purgatory. Of course, that mission was quite fittingly received, just like it had been in his first purgatory, through the television. And this one was shown to be all the more important in Kevin's mind when you note that the fake Evie was holding a sign with a Quran passage written on it, which specifically talks about the end of days. And while Kevin was being reminded of his first few stays in purgatory, Nora was being reminded of the first time that she held a stranger's baby and felt the need to look after it. A situation that may or may not have been connected with those that she'd come to Australia to meet, which we'll come back to in just a moment. But first I wanted to say I found it visually fitting that Nora entered this vast, empty factory to find those people, as that space really illustrated well the emptiness within her. And additionally, the disused sewing machines that littered it only seemed to further remind her that never again would she need clothes made for her departed family, and soon, herself. And once again, we really did see how ready this character was to leave, given her extremely calm heart rate when she was placed inside this confined, coffin-like space. And speaking of spaces that our characters found themselves in, the graffiti-covered alley that Kevin found himself in really did perfectly externalize that man's mind. Its clutter, its confusion, and its chaos. And it really was that confusion that pushed him once again to try and use a band-aid to cure his cancer. Not only did Kevin see Evie Murphy because, like Laurie explained, he could empathize with that girl's desire to run away and be free of his family, finding elsewhere something greater, something that he hoped could heal him in a way that they never had. He also, having been denied the truth from Nora, just needed someone that he could grab and at which he could yell, "Why are you doing this?" Back to Nora, though, and that question, a baby's life or the cure for cancer, though it may have been initially confusing to hear Nora answer that question differently to last week's combustible man and still get the same rejecting answer, I think I've settled on a reason that makes sense. Simply put, different people have different right answers. And what Nora revealed by consenting to have that one theoretical child killed was why she really desired to go. Why she really desired to get blasted by that radiation. And it wasn't to see her children again. It was for her. She still clung to her feelings of injustice, her feelings of pain, her anger, her guilt. She was still that woman that wanted to know the pain that her family may have experienced at their departure, and may still be experiencing now. That woman that tried to simulate that pain by having prostitutes shoot her, all the while knowing that that would never be enough. That woman that couldn't simply put a gun to her own head and pull the trigger, because maybe whatever her children endured had been worse. That woman that wanted to be released from her guilt, and knew that the only real way to do that would be to go the same way to the same place. So again, by choosing to let that theoretical baby die, Nora demonstrated that it wasn't for life that she wanted to go. It was to be released from life, and consequently from her pain, her anger, and her guilt. Which was why, as the opening credit song declared, this love between Kevin and Nora was over. But honestly, as depressing as it was to see Nora sitting in that hotel room, cigarette in hand, water showering down around her, and as heartbreaking as it was to hear Kevin confess to his dad that he was alone, just like Michael Murphy had to Jill Garvey back in season 2, I don't think that there was any other way of these two ever having a real chance of having a real relationship now or down the line without the separation. They needed to stop putting on those band-aids thinking that that was resolving the real issue. They needed to rip them off, take out that scalpel, and painfully cut in deep so they could actually remove the tumor that was causing the real issue. And only then, maybe, someday could they move forwards in health and genuineness. Those are my thoughts anyways on this week's episode of The Leftovers. Definitely comment below and let me know what you guys have thought of the episode. There is so much jammed-packed into all these episodes, visually, thematically, narratively, and there's no way that I can catch it all. And I do apologize if I have in some way insinuated that I have caught everything that there is to analyze. That is not what I'm saying in any way, shape, or form, and I love hearing from you guys, so definitely continue that with me. And finally, please do subscribe. I'm going to continue to review films and television on this channel, and I would love for you to stay up to date on all of those things. But for now, I'm Chris Hartwell. This is The Heartbeat. Thank you for joining me.